Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 2-to-4 player Stranger Things Upside Down, designed by Rob Daviau and published by CMON, who helped sponsor this video. Based on the popular Netflix show, here a young Will Byers has gone missing into a world that's a dark mirror of our own, filled with dangers and supernatural monsters. But his friends are working to find him with help from a mysterious young girl possessing paranormal powers. It's up to us to save Will, so join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, place the double-sided board so it's showing the season you want to play here in the corner. There's one for the first season of the TV show and the second. We'll be setting up the first season, which is shown on this side. Now sort and shuffle separately the Season 1 scene and ally cards, item and action decks, setting them nearby. Then find the level tokens which have this symbol on their back, and set aside the 5 that show this Demogorgon icon. The rest you'll mix into a face-down central pool. Now mix the 5 Demogorgon tokens face down with 7 tokens randomly taken from the pool, and from these, create stacks of 4 tokens each and set them into the 3 spaces of the board labeled as Rescue Will. These are all found on the bottom half of the board, known as the upside down, so it should look like this when you're done. The red circled spaces you'll find all over the board are known as slots, and any that show a number value, you'll now add that number of tokens to. So spaces like these would get 4 each, but these wouldn't get any. When you're done filling in all of the slots, you'll then go around and flip over the top token of each stack found in the upper half of the board. This upper half is known as the town of Hawkins. From what is known as the Season Ally deck, draw and place face up 1 card into each of these 2 spaces. Next, add a number of tokens to their adjacent slots equal to the value shown in the top right-hand corner of each one. So 3 in this case, while 2 would go over here. Then flip the top token of each of these stacks face up. These are the included foes in the game. For this setup, we'll be using the Demogorgon and 2 patrol cars. The 4 Demodogs are only used in the Season 2 setup, so we'll return those back to the box. The large named circles on the board are the various locations, and you'll set the Demogorgon in the school space found in the upside down, and 1 patrol van in the upside down laboratory, with the other going to the Castle Byers location of the town of Hawkins. Each person now picks one of the 6 playable characters in the game. This character 11 can't be chosen, but set her aside for later. In this video, we'll assume we have 3 players who pick Jim, Nancy, and Lucas. The rest of the characters will return to the box. Each player collects the dashboard for their chosen character and sets one of these fear tokens on the start space of their fear track here. If anyone chose Lucas, it says he starts with 1 random item. So draw and set one face up below his board from this deck. Now check each player's starting location here and set their figure into the matching namespace of the board. The 11 figure we had set aside earlier is now placed on this first space of the act track found at the top of the board. Finally, each player is dealt an opening hand of 5 action cards from the deck, and that's the setup. In Stranger Things Upside Down, players will be working together to fulfill the objective of the current season. On this side of the board, the players must rescue their lost friend Will, who's been taken into the dangerous upside-down version of the town of Hawkins. To do this, you'll have to remove all of the tokens from the 3 Rescue Will slots of the board here, here, and here. When playing the included Season 2 version of the game, you'll refer to this page for the setup changes. Here you'll face different foes and have additional challenges we'll discuss later. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the player who most recently rode a bike, or someone you pick randomly, and then going clockwise around and around the table. And on your turn, you'll perform 4 steps in order, starting with the move step. You can skip this step if you want, but if you decide to move, first check the movement value showing on your player board here. All characters have a value of 1 except for Dustin, who has a value of 2. You can choose to boost your move value by playing any number of your action cards from your hand face up onto the table in front of you, adding the values showing in their center to your move value. So now I can move a total of 4 spaces. Just make sure you keep all of the actions you've played during your turn face up in front of you until the end of your turn. Speaking of which, you can share and even show the information on the cards you're holding. You can even keep them face up on the table if you like, but just make sure it's clear which cards you've played and which cards you haven't. Going back to movement, remember, we generated a total movement value of 4. Each point I can spend to move from the space I'm in to an adjacent space, which are any connected by one of these roads. Now, you don't have to spend all of the movement points you have, but any you don't spend during a move step are lost. I should also mention, any number of characters can be in the same space at the same time. If you ever enter a space with a foe, which is this Demogorgon or one of the patrol cars, then you must stop and you lose any remaining movement points you might have had. So if I'd started my move here, and I had 4 movement points and decided to go down, I would count it as 1, 2, and then have to stop here because I entered a space with a foe. Now, if I had started my turn in a space with a foe, I can move and leave it. It's only when you enter a foe's space that you have to stop. Some roads say to gain 1 fear, which happens each time you use them during a move. So going from here to here would cause me to gain 2 fear. For each fear you earn during the game, move your cube 1 space right on this track. If that ever causes you to hit this terrified space, your character is overcome, the game ends, and everyone loses. As we continue, I should point out that the action cards you play may have this friend symbol at the top, or at the bottom some will show this danger symbol, and other cards will show both. We'll discuss danger symbols later, but if you play an action with a friend symbol at the top while in a space with at least one other character, you add +1 to the value of that card. So if I played this to move from here, the total value of this card would be 3, since I played it while in a space with another character. Once a player has reached the space they want to go to, or has run out of action points, or was forced to stop because they encountered a foe, their move ends, and they go to the perform action step of their turn. Here, they can choose to perform one of the actions listed in red text at their current location by playing at least 1 card from their hand, which they would set beside any other cards they'd previously played for movement, but those we've just set aside to keep things a little less cluttered on screen. If you don't play at least 1 card, you can't perform an action. The only other time you can't perform a location's action is if you're in a space with a foe. In that case, you must fight the foe instead, which we'll learn about later. But for now, let's see how each of the location actions work. If a space lets you gather information, as this one does, pick a number of token stacks on the board equal to the total value of your action cards played, and then flip their top tokens over. For example, if I'd played this 1 and 2, I could pick 3 stacks. These stacks can be anywhere on the board, including in the upside down area, but you can't pick stacks that already have their top tokens flipped face up. So maybe I would pick these 3 stacks here. Knowing the values of the tokens within a stack is useful for some of the other actions we'll learn about later. You'll notice that most locations have more than 1 action to choose from. For example, here at the police station, we can either gather information, which we just learned about, or get an item. But remember, as with all actions, you must play at least 1 card. And in the case of getting an item, you then draw as many cards from the item deck as the total value showing on all the cards you just played. So in this case, we'd get to draw 2. You then pick one of them to keep. I'll choose the skateboard. And then any unchosen items are shuffled back into the item deck. Any item you gain is set beneath your dashboard, and as it says here, you can have at most 2 items at a time. If you already have 2 items and would gain a third, you pick any one of them to set into a face-up discard pile beside its deck. You could even pick the one that you just drew. There are a variety of different items, and they'll each provide you with a bonus for specific actions. And if you have more than one you could use on the same action, their benefits can both be applied. We'll see some examples of how items can be used a little later in this video. Just know characters can't give items to other characters and can't use each other's items even when those characters are sharing the same space. The get item action of the Main Street location has a +2, so along with whatever action cards you play, you add an additional 2 points to their final value. So in a case like this, we'd get to draw 5 cards from the deck and choose 1. But just know, you still have to play at least 1 action card to be able to take this action at all. You don't just automatically get the +2. Now let's learn about the calm down action. Like we just saw, sometimes this will have a bonus value that is added to the action cards you play for it. Let's say we were here and played a value 1 action card. We get 2 more points for this action because of the printed bonus here, and because we're with a friend, this symbol at the top of the card we played gives us another point for a total of 4. And for each calm down point you generate, you move your fear marker 1 space to the left on your dashboard. If you ever get back to your start space, you just ignore any other points you might have collected. And keep in mind, even if another player is in your space, only you can receive the benefit of actions you're resolving. Now, the 3 actions we just learned, calm down, get item, and gather info, are all known as uncontested actions. This means that when you perform them, you always succeed. However, the rest of the actions we're going to describe are known as contested actions. And there's a chance that you'll fail when you attempt them. So let's go through each one, starting with the rescuing will action. A contested action will have a stack of tokens beside it. Sometimes the top one will be face up, but not in this case. The tokens range in value from 0 to 5, but you're not allowed to look through the stack. Instead, you must first commit as many cards from your hand as you're willing to attempt the action. In this case, let's commit a 2, a 2, and a 3 to this action for a total of 7. You might also have other cards that boost the total for a specific action, like our flashlight that gives +1 to the rescue will action. Also notice that each character has a special ability in this area that might apply. For example, if Joyce Byers' character was in the game, the player controlling her would get +1 to any rescue will actions they took. So always keep your character's abilities in mind when playing. For now, we'll say we had just played these cards and had this flashlight for a total value of 8. With your action total established, you now flip the tokens over in the stack and add all of their values together. If you ever see this Demogorgon symbol, its value is equal to how many stacks of any size are in this Demogorgon slot group. A slot group is any number of slots bordered by a frame like we see here. So in this case, each Demogorgon symbol would have a value of 4. If the slot group looked like this, then each of these tokens would have a value of 6, but we'll set it back to 4 for now. So now we know our total stack value is 3 plus 2 plus 4 plus 0, which is 9. If the total value you created for the action is less than the stack value, your action failed. And you then gain fear equal to the difference between these two values. So in this case, 9 minus 8, which is 1. You then flip all of the stack's tokens face down and give them a good shuffle. One is then randomly returned unseen back to the central pool, and the leftovers are stacked back into their slot. In this way, even though you didn't succeed in the action, it's likely the action will be easier on the next attempt, unless you got unlucky and just removed a 0-value token. But either way, each failed attempt will remove another token. Also keep in mind, the 5 tokens showing the Demogorgon icons were only mixed into the rescue will stacks during the setup. However, as they're removed and sent to the central pool, they could get added to other stacks later, as we'll see. Let's go back and say we had flipped these tokens over to find a 1 plus a 1 plus a 2 plus a 2 for a total of 6. If your action value is equal to or higher than the total value in the stack, you succeed and return the entire stack to be mixed face down back into the central pool. You then finish resolving the benefit of the action. In the case of rescuing will, there is no specific benefit except that you win the game as soon as all 3 rescue will slots are empty. So this is a very important action in the game. And that's how the rescue will action works. All of the remaining actions also have stacks that have to be faced in the same way and cause the same result if you fail. However, they each have unique benefits if you succeed. So let's go through each of them now. If you succeed in an action to recruit an ally after removing all of the tokens in its stack, collect the ally at that location and place it below your board. But unlike items, there's no limit to how many allies a player can have. Each will provide your character with the advantages they show at their bottom, and can be used anytime their situation applies. That said, in some cases, like we see here on Benny, for its effect to be resolved, you have to remove that ally from the game, which means taking it from in front of you and putting it back in the box. Just keep in mind you can't give an ally you've recruited to another player. After successfully recruiting an ally, draw the top card of the ally deck to replace it, and then put a number of face-down tokens from the central pool into the slot here, equal to the value shown on the newly drawn ally. Now let's look at how you perform the Investigate the Lab action, which actually starts with 3 different stacks. You pick any one of them to perform the action against, and if you succeed, you remove that stack, mixing it back into the pool. Each lab slot that is empty provides you with a benefit that occurs later in a player's turn, so we'll talk about it at that time. For now, let's move on to the action known as Helping 11. 11 is a kid gifted with paranormal powers, but she's also very scared and confused. With this action, you offer her some help, and then she uses her powers to help you. There are 2 spots for this action, one here in Hawkins and another in the Upside Down. When taking this action, first pick any one of the related powerful abilities by the location that still has a stack of tokens beside it. Then attempt an action against it. Let's pick Telekinesis for this example. If you're successful, you mix the stack back into the pool face down and resolve this listed effect. In this case, it would let us automatically remove any 2 stacks from the Demogorgon slots. Once a Help 11 stack is gone, you cannot choose that effect again for the rest of the game. Next time we attempt this action here, we'd have to pick one of these 2. All the actions we've seen so far are only possible to perform if you're in a space without a foe, which are the Demogorgon and Patrol vehicles. If one of these are in your space at the start of the action step of your turn, then you can't perform any other action than the one called Fight the Foe. To fight the Demogorgon, pick any one stack in its slot group here to perform the action against, following the normal rules. If you're successful, mix that stack back into the token pool and move the Demogorgon to an adjacent region. Now let's say instead at the start of a fight, all these stacks are already empty. As always, you must play at least 1 card to perform the action, but you automatically succeed. And instead of moving the foe just 1 space, you move it as many spaces as your action value. So in this case, I'd move it 3 spaces in any direction I want, and it isn't forced to stop if it passes through other characters or foes. Now let's look at the Patrol foes. There are 2 of them, but no matter which one you're fighting, always take your action against the Patrol stack you'll find right here. If you're successful, discard the stack and move that Patrol to any space on the board in Hawkins or the Upside Down. And then to complete the action, refill its stack with 4 new tokens. Foes are never removed when you're successful fighting them, it just gets them out of your space. And remember, even if you are successful when fighting a foe, that's still the only action you can take that turn. You can't also take the action that's now in your empty space. Of course, I should mention, if you fail an attack against a foe, you still take fear like you do when failing on any other contested action, and you still remove a random token from their stack. If there's more than 1 foe in your space, you only fight one of them, and you pick which one it will be. Now, if you ever have to fight a foe and happen to have no action cards left in your hand, unlike other actions, you must still fight. Just consider your action value to be 0. And in a case like this, also unlike other actions, even though you didn't play a card, you do add in any other fight bonuses you might have because the action is actually occurring. You have no choice in a situation like this, you must fight. And those are all of the actions. When playing the second season scenario, there are new actions for fighting Demodogs, removing vines, and closing the gate, which you can read about here in the rulebook when you're ready to try that side of the board. So to summarize, the first step of your turn is to move if you want to. The next step is to perform an action if you want to, unless there's a foe in your space, because then you must perform a fight action. Either way, after your action step, it's then time to refill your hand. Remember, all action cards you played for your move and action should still be face up in front of you, and you'll leave them there as you refill your hand by drawing cards until you're holding a total of 5. When you get to this step of your turn, if there are ever not enough cards in the draw deck to take as many as you are owed, take as many as you can, and then, and only then, do you move all of your played cards from that turn into the discard pile. But be sure to remember how many of these danger symbols they had on them. This will be important in the last step of your turn, as you'll see. Then you shuffle the entire discard pile into a new draw deck. Anytime you have to reshuffle the action deck like this, you also move 11 forward 1 space on this track. If 11 is already on this final space, and you would need to move her again, the players have run out of time and they all lose the game. Either way, once the deck runs out and has been reshuffled and 11 moved, you will then continue to draw as many cards as you were owed to get your hand back up to 5. Either way, once you've refilled your hand, it's time for the last step of a player's turn, reveal scenes. First, count up all of these danger symbols found on all the action cards you played during this turn. Then add that value to the number showing by 11's current space. This is how many scene cards you'll draw from this deck during this step, unless you have some benefits that might affect this total. For example, if you have Officer Powell as an ally, it says you get to ignore one of your danger symbols, and ignoring them is good. You also get to ignore one danger symbol for each of these spaces at the Investigate the Lab location that are exposed. For the sake of this example, we'll assume our player had to draw 2 scene cards, and you always draw and fully resolve one before drawing the next. When revealed, the scene card will have an effect at the bottom that must be resolved. In this case, we must pick one of the patrol cars and move it 2 locations towards our character. Anytime a scene gives a choice like this, the players can discuss the options together, but it's the player currently taking their turn who makes the final decision. In this case, we pick either patrol foe and move it 2 spaces towards our character. We'll pick this one. A foe always takes the shortest path to its target, and if there's more than one equally short distance, the active player decides which path the foe takes. After a scene card is resolved, you place it into a face-up discard pile and draw the next one if more need to be resolved. Sometimes the scene will instruct you to create a new stack of tokens from the central pool, putting them into a certain empty slot, in this case an empty Demogorgon slot. And if there isn't an empty space to put them in, you'll be given another instruction to follow instead. Some cards in the Season 2 scene deck, like this one, will add tokens to stacks that already have tokens. Unless otherwise stated, new tokens are always added face down on top of the related stack, unless the top token is already face up. If so, you instead add new tokens to the bottom of its stack. No stack can ever be more than 4 tokens. And here we have a stack of 3 already, but let's say we were then told to add 3 more tokens to this stack. When that happens, you add as many as possible, but once you reach the limit of 4, you count how many tokens are left over, and then every player gains 1 fear for each token that couldn't be added. And then these leftover tokens are returned to the general pool. If this End of the Day card is ever drawn from the scene deck, as it instructs, you reshuffle together all of the scene cards from the draw deck, the discard pile, and even this card itself into a new draw deck. You then move the Demogorgon to any location in the Upside Down, and then stop drawing any more scene cards you might have been meant to. Once you've revealed and resolved all the scenes you needed to for your turn, you then add all of the action cards you may have played in front of you that turn to the action discard pile. Then the next player in clockwise order takes their turn. And turns will continue like this around and around the table until you've removed all of the tokens from the Rescue Will slots. The moment that happens, the game ends and all of the players win. However, if one or more players hits the terrified space of their fear track, or if the action deck would ever need to be reshuffled when 11 is already on the 3rd space, the game ends immediately and the players all lose. And don't forget, you can play the second season scenario on the other side of the board. You'll have a new scene deck, new allies, and new actions that involve removing vines and closing the gate, as well as fighting Demodogs. To win, you'll have to both rescue Will as before, but then after close the gate by removing all the tokens from its stack. But that season of the game I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Stranger Things Upside Down. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get a notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.